Hello, class, and welcome to our reading review of Writing Logically, Thinking Critically, pages 41 to 49 and 203 to 209. Just as, right, you can focus on making inferences after reading a story or a poem, you can also make inferences after looking at visual arguments. And specifically, I think this directly relates to propaganda and its damaging, right, assumptions when we're thinking critically about things, right? Propaganda is essentially any sorts of appeals to pathos, specifically in advertising, right, that don't have any logos. They only rely on emotions. So make sure when you're making a decision, if you are being persuaded with emotions, you like something or you want something or you hope for something, make sure there's logic behind it too. Because a lot of times advertisements will try to persuade you with emotions and there's no logos to support it. There's no logic. In that case, we call it propaganda. So you have some really interesting advertisements in the book that I thought did a nice job, and the readings and the analysis do a nice job of breaking down the images per se. And again, it's not just words, it's also visuals. And part of the reason why we're reading this section is so that you understand how to avoid visual propaganda, right, in your decision making process in life. Remember, this class isn't just for learning how to analyze literature, right, and write about literature. The critical thinking skills that you apply to your essays and to your assignments, you can also apply to the everyday decisions that you make in life. Just like people use metaphors a lot without realizing it, right? Poetry for everyday life, that essay we read, a lot of times people don't realize how valuable it is to have critical thinking skills at your disposal before you're making everyday decisions so you can make the most effective and logical decisions possible. Now, keep in mind, as right, you're reading the Shakespearean plays, they were meant to be acted out. So if any of you are spending some time watching any film versions of it, when you see the spectacle, all of the things that are on stage, you see things, you can make inferences based on what the directors and producers include or don't include. Those of you that are film fans, when you analyze a film, you're making inferences. You're making conclusions about the unknown based on what you know, based on what you see, just like with literature. So hopefully everybody's feeling good about making inferences. Let's turn to pages 203 to 209 with me, right? And this is all about integrating research and evaluating your sources. Now, one of the best things about having the library database at your disposal is you have all the sources that you're going to need for any of the essays that you write this semester. So for this first one, go to the library database, click on literature and literary criticisms. I've provided the link right on the Canvas page with the Précis prompt, right, in order to get your sources, right? Click on the literature and literature criticism databases. My favorite database is the Literature Resource Center. When you go to that, type in your author's name, and then on the right side of the page, you can click on the title of the work that you want to read sources about and limit your search. If you do this for Kate Chopin and the Story of an Hour, depending on the database you go to, you should have anywhere from 10 to 20 sources. Personally, I always read the title of the source and the two-sentence description of the source itself right before I click on it and decide to read it. So any of the sources that mention Mrs. Mallard as a woman, female identity, right, self-assertion, things of that nature, I would choose those sources. Specifically, right, when you click on limit search by title, It will only bring up articles in which the story of an hour is mentioned. However, I think your best bet is to focus on the articles where the story of an hour is mentioned in the title of the article, because then you know that article specifically focuses on that story, not on all of Chopin's writing. So you've got the database, you know they're effective. Everything you get from the library database is reputable. Now, if you choose to get sources online from other databases or search engines, be careful and follow the guidelines on pages 203 to 209 and make sure that you're getting reputable sources. I'd like to think we all know what a reputable source is, and after reading these pages, it should refresh on that in case you have any questions. If you have any questions about a source, get in touch with me. Call me or email me, right, to the Canvas inbox. Ask me. Ask me if you think it's a reputable source. The reason why you do your secondary source précis is so that I can understand what your sources are and make sure that you recognize their purpose, thesis, support, and audience and tone before you analyze and incorporate that source into your essay. You can use sentences from your précis in your essay. That's why you turn them in advance. Now, you shouldn't copy and paste the whole précis in your essay, but you could use some of those sentences as you're introducing your source and setting up the quotes from that source. So make sure you're getting your sources from the library database or reputable websites or databases. For this essay, if you type in Kate Chopin on Google, her website's going to come up, katechopin.org. The document titled Biography from katechopin.org is a great source for this essay. You also have your essays on the library database. Key in on the ones that mention the story of an hour or Mrs. Mallard in the actual title, and then you will know that it's specifically a source that will relate to this paper topic. You have some directions on how to punctuate your quotes on pages 206, 207, and 208. Make sure you're using quotation marks correctly. Make sure you're using your ellipses points correctly. Make sure that if you paraphrase, you still put quotes around their words. You have to put quotes around anybody else's words or numbers. So even if you put it into your own words, but you borrow 2 or 3 of theirs, still put quotes around them. If you change all the wording completely, you do not need quotes, but you still need to cite a paraphrase. So I always tell students it's a lot easier to just take a direct quote. And as the book says on 206 and 207, direct quotes are the best way to cite your sources. Put quotation marks around their words and cite the author's name and page or paragraph number. But remember, even if you paraphrase, if you just borrow 1 or 2 words or 1 or 2 numbers, if you're citing percentages or numbers, you still have to use quotation marks. And you have to cite paraphrases and direct quotes. So I always tell students, why not just take the direct quote rather than trying to put it into your own words, because sometimes that can be more difficult. Nevertheless, you have both options available. Just make sure in the parenthesis at the end of the sentence for both quotes and paraphrases, you put the author's last name and the page or paragraph number. Thank you for your attention. Stay tuned. More to come.